All right, everybody. Well, welcome to this month's Flight School Connector here at AOPA. This topic we're actually excited about this. We had a good time actually prepping for this one, I think. Customer feedback, how to give it, get it, and use it. So, kind of an interesting topic. And so, with me today, as always, we've got Elizabeth Tennyson, our Senior Vice President from the AOPA Foundation, and who is our leader here at You Can Fly. So, Elizabeth, welcome again.
Thank you, Chris.
And also behind the scenes, although a little less behind the scenes it is with our Don't Get Rusty webinar, we've got Stephen Schroeder, coordinator of our Flight Training Initiative. So welcome, Stephen. Yes. Now they'll recognize you from Don't Get Rusty with the mask.
Yeah,
Perfect.
yeah, I
All
forgot to
right.
have the baklava on for today.
That's right. We can't reveal. It is Halloween though, but at 1 million subs, we'll reveal Steven's face. All right. So just real quick before we get started, we got Sporty's Pilot Shop. I want to thank them for sponsoring the program. And if you are interested in starting a pilot shop, they've got a special deal for you. It's the Sporty's Dealer Program. You can see some of the details on the screen there, but go check it out at sportys.com/dealer. A great way to get a shop going and with some affordable products and good stuff too. Because I know I bought lots of stuff from Sporty's and always have appreciated it. All right. So today, here's what we're going to cover. Elizabeth and I, and Stephen too, we're going to chat a little bit about customer feedback. And so the main sort of themes of this one are, why do we want to get, or why would you bother getting customer feedback? And then we're going to talk a little bit about how to give feedback, and I'll explain why we would talk about how to give feedback when the theme is all about getting feedback. And then we'll talk about some ways of actually collecting and getting that customer feedback. And then finally, hopefully in a practical sense too, how to use it to help your business out. So that's what we're going to talk about today, and we're hoping this is good for you guys. So let's go ahead, and we got a poll here, Stephen. Let's run this poll, which is, what is the most valuable type of customer feedback in your opinion? And so we've got the options. I know Stephen will have this little show up there in Teams for you. And so is it positive feedback from happy customers? Is it negative feedback from unsatisfied customers? Is it constructive criticism from a loyal customer? Or maybe you just rather not know. No news is good news. I don't want to know about it because I'm worried about what I might hear. So let's see. We'll look for your results there. So you should see a thing that popped up in your Teams window. And pardon me if I look over here, because this is where I can see the stuff for Teams on this view. So I'm not looking away from you. Just another screen. All right, and then we should be able to see, and I think I've got to click on the chat to start seeing some things. So please make sure you fill out or click the response and tell us what you think. All right, I think we've got almost everybody. So let's go ahead, Stephen, and I'll hit done on this. If you look in the chat, I believe you see the results there. And wow, what do you think, Elizabeth? Everybody's saying it's like a 100% saying constructive criticism from a loyal customer.
Well, I think they knew what we were going to talk about today, and I think probably we've all had some experience with customer feedback of these different types. Some are a lot more fun to receive than others.
Exactly. And of course, yeah, we never want the negative stuff, but it's interesting. I'm really curious or excited to talk about today, like how you can actually use negative feedback to your advantage as we were doing some of the research for this one. So the first part is, it's customer feedback. Why would you bother getting it? And I have a feeling that for you folks on here already online with us, that you already know why it's valuable. But what was interesting in doing some of the research, I know I found this American Express study in an article, which, by the way, we do have a handout, right, Stephen, for some of the resources, some of the articles and things. So we'll share that a little later. But the typical consumer tells 15 people of a bad customer experience, but only 1 in 26 will actually tell the company about it. Which the interesting part there is that, you know, it's like they'll spread the bad news about you to everybody else, but you won't even know about it happening. Instead, what will happen is that customer will just leave. And then to go get a new customer after that. Elizabeth, do you want to chat about that one?
Yeah, sure. So according to the Harvard Business Review, it costs 5 times more to get a new customer than to keep one. And that includes an unhappy customer. So if you've got an unhappy customer and you may have to spend some money or some time or both to fix that situation, even after making that investment, even when it can be a little bit significant, it's still going to cost you 5 times more to get a new customer. This is an interesting one right now, I think, too, for a lot of flight schools, because Right now, many of you have people knocking down your doors. You've got more customers than you can deal with, and some of you have waiting lists, and it's a really busy time to be a flight school. But even so, you do not want someone running around telling 15 of their friends that things are bad. So you want to first find out about the customer feedback, and then you want to do something about it.
Exactly. And one of the key things here too is that when you get that feedback, whether it's positive or negative, it's really the only way that you're going to know what's actually happening, how your business is doing, because we are often so close to the projects that we're working on, the service that we're providing, that we don't realize what that looks like from the outside. And so it's a really important and valuable thing to get that feedback so that we can actually see how we're really doing. And in fact, I know, Elizabeth, this is a point I wanted to turn this one over to you, this idea of turning a negative experience into a positive one.
Yeah, after someone has had a bad experience with you, if you can turn that into a positive experience, we call it customer service recovery, then you are actually going to build more loyalty than you had before. So, strangely enough, if you give people a perfect experience every time, you will get X amount of loyalty. But that amount will go up if they've had a bad experience and you've been able to fix it to their satisfaction. Now, please don't take that wrong. Please do not run around creating minor problems for your customers so that you can fix them. It doesn't really work that way. But if you can go the extra mile for somebody to fix a problem, they're going to be more loyal to you. And as it says here, they're going to tell 11 more people when they're happy. So that's great.
And I know Jamie just shared from up at Skytrek, Alaska. Hey, Jamie, it says a customer told me that my positive response to a negative customer's reaction was the reason they decided to come to me for instruction. So right there, that's just proof in the pudding, as it were.
We've talked about that being a subject that we'll deal with in greater depth in the future, because that service recovery process really is important, and it requires sometimes it's very challenging if you know your customer is wrong. We don't like to talk about the customer being wrong, but the truth is sometimes they are, and dealing with that when they're wrong and angry, that takes some special skills. So we're going to dive into that in the future, I think.
Exactly. And so that we're looking for that. We'll talk a little bit about it today, but really, yeah, I think it's going to be a great topic for a future session on Connector here. All right, so let's go ahead and let's take a look at something that I wanted to add in. I did my graduate, I did my master's degree recently, about a year or two ago. And one of the things that in doing that, I focused mostly on learning in aviation because that's what I was. My background's in education. But one of the things I thought about here was that I did a whole paper and a whole thing on feedback and what makes effective feedback. And obviously, as instructors, we know that feedback is important. We talk about the debrief after a flight, how important that is, that's where their learning really happens, is during that debrief, because we know that the airplane is a really bad classroom. And I was really thinking to myself is that, if you know how to give good feedback, it potentially can help you also craft how to get that feedback from your customers. So I wanted to share just a little bit of this research with you. And so the big thing here is, like I said, knowing what's effective can help you maybe know how to ask for it better. In the research, it was from a study, and if you really want to get into that stuff, I'll let you know, but it's Carlton et al. It was a 2016 study. I can give you that if you just email me later. I'm sure most of you don't want to read that one. But the effects of positive versus negative feedback, they did a study on that, and they did some research. And what they found was, as you can imagine, most people tend to like positive feedback more than they like negative feedback. And that shouldn't be a big surprise. In fact, they said that positive feedback, that positive way of doing it, usually helps get people's attitudes up. It helps them feel better, and it typically will promote further learning. Negative feedback, on the other hand, usually does the opposite. It makes the person feel bad. It shuts them down from learning. I mean, this is probably nothing surprising to you. But what was really interesting in the study, though, is they were really trying to find out about constructive criticism. And with constructive criticism, it's a combination of the two. It's like you want to have some of that positive, but I read some other studies too that said positive by itself does not work for learning, because it doesn't help the person move forward. They think, oh, I'm already doing really well and there's nothing more to do. But having that little bit of the constructive part, we won't necessarily call it negative, but the parts that this is what you can work on, was absolutely key to helping people learn. And in this case, what we're trying to do, if you're running a flight school, is how do I provide my services better? How do I do my job better? And so that's where you want to maybe solicit that constructive criticism from your customers. And so here are the key parts of constructive criticism. Number one, the recipient needs some background knowledge, the recipient of the constructive criticism. So they got to know a little bit of something about, so they can hang all the things that you're telling them on the right framework to understand what it is you're getting. And so in this case, when it comes to the customer, if we were to flip it for the customer, it would be making sure that, that you know enough about them and what's going on to help you understand why they're giving this feedback, why it is, and also know about how they perceive your process. The second aspect of it is that you need to make sure that it's clear that there's an emphasis that it will require effort to improve in the learning process. So it's like when we're teaching somebody to fly, it's like you're going to have to put some effort in. You make sure they know that it's going to take practice, it's going to take time, and that's okay, and that's part of the process. And so on the flip side of that too is it's also, hopefully that's clear for them to know, like, that to fix these problems, it's going to take some work and some trial and whatever, working through it to make the thing right. And so that might be something that you could use in your communication with them, saying that I'm willing to do it, I just need to know what I need to do for you to make this better. Mistakes are part of the learning process. This is a key part. In fact, I just had this conversation at home with my stepdaughter, literally about it's okay to make mistakes. We all make mistakes. It is completely unreasonable to expect everybody to be perfect all the time. That can't happen. And in fact, we learn more. There's a whole ton of research into error-based learning. We learn more from the mistakes that we make than we do from getting it right the first time. And so the same here. And then finally, there has to be a clear and achievable path to get where you want to go to make that progress. And so in that case, sort of flipping it over for the customer is it's the kind of things you can do is you want to ask, what do I need to do to help resolve this problem you're having? What is it that you're hoping to get out of this? Or what are you looking for to see potentially what you could provide to help them? And then it may even be helpful to explain some of your side of it, because maybe they don't understand the process that's going on behind the scenes. And, especially in flight training, we have all the regs and everything else, these barriers that potentially may be, sort of artificial or things that we can't control, to help them understand this is why we do it the way we do. So just some things to think about as we go through this and soliciting this customer feedback.
Can we talk about that last one for just a second, Chris? Because that's a really important one. It's important for your customers to understand what's going on from your perspective, but it's equally important that it not sound like an excuse or like you're whining,
Right.
or like you're responding to their complaint with a complaint of your own. So when you do that, when you try to explain, it's important to try to stick to the facts, not the emotional piece.
Right.
Often a complaint or negative feedback is coming from a very emotional place, and that may or may not even have anything to do with your flight school. They may have had a bad experience, but on a better day, they wouldn't have been so upset by it. So when you need to explain something to them about, say, your process or the regulations or their airport requirements, do it in a fact-based way, calmly, and try to really minimize adding to what may already be a tense or emotional situation.
And the other thing that I would add on to that as well, I absolutely agree with you, Elizabeth, is the other thing I'd add on that is to help them understand, because maybe they can make suggestions that you hadn't thought of about a way to do it from their perspective, saying like, we've got to hit steps A, B, and C, and this is the way that we've designed this. And maybe that's like, well, did you think about doing it this way? And you're like, oh, I hadn't thought of it that way, and that would make it easier for you. Let's take a look at that. So be open to them providing ideas and feedback to you that maybe would help improve your process. So that's what I also meant in getting at that, as well as that idea of making sure that they understand sort of what's going on, and then potentially they can suggest things, or you might say, I love that idea, and here's, whatever you can explain. So you can get into a discussion. Okay, let's do another quick. We have one more poll today, and we've got a thing at the end. But today, this poll gets into sort of previewing what's coming up. What customer feedback methods have you tried? I know Stephen's going to get that poll up there. If you would go ahead and give us your answers. What customer feedback methods have you tried? Have you tried surveys? Maybe using social media to elicit feedback, or just watch for it on there? Could be third-party reviews like a Google, Yelp sort of thing. Maybe in-person interviews, and that can be formal or informal, or others. And then feel free just to click on that and then just throw it in the chat. Tell us what the kind of things you use to get feedback from your customers. And let's see what we got. Actually, I'm watching the results come in, and it actually looks pretty even.
It is multiple choice if you have more than one thing.
Yes, you can select all that apply.
So that's really interesting. People are taking a lot of different approaches to this.
This is awesome.
As I watch those roll in, Chris, I am pleasantly surprised by how many people are tackling the in-person interview.
Yes.
because that can be one of the more challenging ways to go about this, but it can also be the way where you can really get at the heart of what's going on to get that feedback, because you have the opportunity to interact and ask questions and follow up on things that you're not sure about. So that's terrific.
All right, so I don't know, Stephen, if you close it or not, but I think you can see the results there in the chat, and it's pretty even. Like you said, Elizabeth, in-person interviews kind of taking first place with pretty even with surveys and third party, and then social media being there at 16% of what folks are doing. So let's talk a little bit about that. How do we get customer feedback? And to your point, it was almost like we were leading into the next slide, which was you should use multiple sources. Don't depend on one. In fact, in some of the stuff, and I will provide the links to these articles, I found a bunch of articles on this online, and I sort of sorted through some of the ones I thought were more valuable. So the multiple sources, social media and websites. Some people might say they depend on those alone. Like, well, I just wait and somebody comes to my website. The article is saying that's not enough. It's too late. You need to try to get it in multiple ways. So maybe Elizabeth, you want to talk a little bit about the sort of the good tips on using a survey as an option?
Yeah, surveys can be really, really helpful, but it's also easy for them to get out of control. And this is something that we've had experience with. So do keep it short, because it really is such a thing as fatigue. And I know I have walked away from more than one survey that I intended to provide customer feedback. But when it went on and on and on, and I had no estimate of how long it was going to take, I thought, I just don't have time for this. And so, keep it as short as you can. If you can only ask one question, or if it's that kind of format, or you feel like just you're not going to be able to hold people's attention, why not start with a net promoter score?
Mhm.
So for those of you who are familiar with that, it's basically saying, would you recommend this school, service, flight instructor, whatever it is, to a friend? And you can go from a 0 to 10 scale, and it'll give you a really strong sense, and it's a very, very reliable measure, surprisingly, for how you're doing overall. And you should think about anybody who gives you a score of less than 7 on that 0 to 10 scale. You should probably follow up with that person, because that is a relatively low score. The other thing is, if you're going to do more than just the one question, only ask questions that you can do something about, that are going to help you meet your goals. It's easy to just get wrapped up in the different kinds of questions you could ask and the different things you might like to know. But again, that's going to defeat your purpose of keeping it short. And information that you can't do anything with, that you can't respond to, is not really going to help you. And it's not going to help your customer either. It could even fan the flames if they're unhappy. Don't ask yes or no questions where possible, because you're going to get a lot more if you let people respond in their own language, the words that they want to use. Make sure that your rating scales are consistent. Be careful to avoid leading or loaded questions. That is very easy to ask a loaded question without intending to. So if you're a small operation and you're wanting to ask this and you don't have access to resources for surveys, have 2 or 3 of your friends take the survey and see what happens, and see if you're getting a response from them that maybe one of your questions is loaded, or has some kind of subtext to it that you're missing. And the thing about surveys too is, make sure you set aside time to analyze the data and decide what you're going to do about it. It's great to do a survey, but if you never actually look at the responses, or you don't look at them systematically and think, how can I address these issues, you've wasted everybody's time, not least yours.
And I know that we're definitely give some tips on that in a little bit later here in the presentation. So hopefully some ideas for how to go about that. One of the things too that I thought was interesting in some of that research was that that when you look at the social media and the website thing, somebody putting something there on social media, typically only people who are really excited about you or are really upset with you are going to go to those, to take time to bother with that. So hitting them up with a survey at some convenient place is a good way to catch those ones in the middle. So you can find out things that might be heading that way or another. So you kind of get a broader view. And don't forget too that if you haven't taken part, here's a shameless plug for in the flight training experience survey and the awards program that we do. But if you take part and your school gets school or CFI gets at least 5 responses in our survey, remember you will get a report card from us, which that's surveys coming from a third party we've gathered and give to you with all the questions that they've answered and the free responses if they were willing to share them. So just check that out. Keep that in mind for next year. Okay. Another one is live customer feedback. I put it in quotes, and that could be whether it's like a chat function, maybe you use on a website if you're kind of sophisticated that way. I know we see that with large companies and things, or a blog function, or it could even just be talking to the folks that are in the lobby there, or that are as they're going through training, just having those conversations. So it's an informal or a formal thing. So some of the things I've seen flight schools do, they talked about taking advantage of, obviously just walking through the lobby or just kind of, listening in on conversations and then just sort of jumping in and asking, how are things going? Kind of the thing maybe you'd see like when you go to a restaurant and the owner walks around or the manager walks around and says, how was your meal? So just kind of checking in. It could be a formal thing too. I know that there are schools that will do it right before or after solo, and then again for cross country, and at the different phases in training, they make a point of having the person come in and just chat with the chief CFI just to see how things are going and making sure that they're satisfied with what's happening. Because you don't want to wait for things to sort of fester and build and then blow up. You'd rather catch us ahead of time and fix it early. And so that's kind of the big part there. Third-party review sites are a great thing to do. And I think we're going to talk about those again in another slide in a little bit more detail, but things like whether it's Yelp or Google My Business or some popular ones, but all these things are great ways, especially if you do well on them. And even with a negative review, showing that positive is a way to turn that around, even on those third-party review sites like that. That's a good way so you can monitor, and then that will bring you customers because people will go look. They do look it up. Think about it. I know I do it before I buy something online. So I always want to go search, and that's kind of today's world. We also want to go see what other people are saying about them. And then the one other thing we found was that social media can actually be more powerful than even those third-party reviews like a Yelp or Google My Business or things like that. So figure out, now obviously there are a ton of social media platforms. So you want to figure out which ones most of your customers use and then focus on that. Because you can't do everything. It's too much. It'll take too much time. But pick a few that you find are going to give you the biggest bang for your buck and then build a presence on those. And if you're looking for a way on how to build social media presence, don't forget we did a presentation on this just a few months ago with our social media person here, Kevin Cortez. So we have a session on that here from Connector. And then you might even consider getting a social influencer. And that could be someone that maybe they go for a discovery flight or they take a lesson with you and they do a YouTube video or a blog or some sort, because that's a great way to expose yourself or to get exposure to a larger audience. And it's sort of that really qualified opinion in a sense, because you get to see what was it like to work with this business and go through that. All right, anything I missed, you guys? Nope. All right.
No.
So tips for getting it. So let's go ahead and we'll chat about this one. I'll take that first one. Make a personal ask. This is something because Stephen and I work really hard on trying to get folks to do well with a survey and get people to respond to it. And that is by far the biggest thing that we see. Schools that get the most survey responses are the ones that go out and make a personal ask. Ask your customers. Because I was just speaking to one school and they were talking to me about how, well, we have it on the website and we have a sign on the desk. But I guarantee you, the ones where the person, the staff's out there or the owner's out there and saying, hey, would you mind just taking a moment and taking the survey for us? They get way more responses than just sort of passively having it there. So you definitely want to do the signs and things like that, but make that personal ask.
And then, that works for every type of feedback, not just a survey. Ask people to go and review you on Yelp or other third-party sites. Ask people to have a conversation with you and have that informal interaction around that. And it's especially effective if it's somebody that they trust or respect. So as a flight school owner or chief flight instructor, you're going to fall into that category. And so, don't be afraid to say, hey, can you give us some feedback?
Exactly. And the other interesting thing that we saw in this research or these advice that was given is to specific points along that experience or in the customer experience when to ask for these things. So make that ask, but ask following a call to action. So maybe you've asked them to do something and then they respond to that call to action, whatever it might be. And so that's a great time to also go, hey, would you mind taking a survey for us? Because obviously they're already energized enough to do whatever it is you asked of them to do. And that's a great point to ask them, hey, would you mind filling out the survey or go here and give us a review? Because you got somebody that's clearly engaged with your business and cares about it. What do you think, Elizabeth, about asking when a customer stops buying or stops
that's a great time to ask, because there's so many reasons that could happen and you can get to the bottom of it and find out if there's an issue. especially in flight training, it's kind of a double win for you. If they've left because they're unhappy, it gives you an opportunity to fix it. But if they've left for other reasons, the things we hear about all the time, life got in the way, work was too demanding, kids at home, whatever that looks like, it also gives you a chance to work with them to find a way to bring them back into the fold, to follow up with them and to know what's going on. So that's a great opportunity to ask, is when somebody stops coming to your school. But that means you got to track it and you got to be on top of it and set some kind of a timeline. Um, how often do you ask? Do you ask after a week or do you ask after a month? When do you do that? And that really depends on the cadence of that customer interaction. And there are also ways you can set this to happen automatically. If somebody doesn't schedule a lesson for a couple of weeks, maybe you guys are already doing that. Ask why as part of that reminder.
Exactly. That's something obviously you can also train your, good training for the CFIs to do as well, is to kind of check in, like, what happened to my student? Why haven't they come in? And then they can help you identify, hey, this person doesn't want to come in anymore. Now you have that opportunity to say, well, let's find out why. But so great points. And then, as Elizabeth already mentioned earlier about surveys, you want to make this customer feedback as painless as possible. So especially if it's potentially one where they're going to tell you about problems, don't do that in front of other people. That's a bad idea. Make it comfortable, make it less threatening so that you can try to get some honest feedback, because they may feel uncomfortable giving you some constructive criticism or some negative feedback. And so try to do that in private if you can, if they're willing to do that. I know, Elizabeth, you know a lot about this, and we're gonna save some of the finer details for this for a future episode, but express empathy and do not make excuses, things that you've already mentioned.
Yeah, absolutely. So, it's important when a customer tells you that they're having a bad experience or they've had a bad experience, you don't have to agree with them to validate that experience. And very often, you're not going to get to the heart of what the problem is until they feel heard. So make sure that they feel heard. Use all of your listening skills, active listening, say back to them what you're hearing. Make sure that you really understand. Once they've been through that process, now they're going to be able to tell you what the heart of the matter is. And it's often quite different than the first thing that they tell you. So it's worth taking the time, and it can be very hard to sort of swallow your own reaction if somebody comes out swinging. They're angry and they're going to tell you how it is and how you've screwed up and how your school's not working. And that's really tough, but you owe it to yourself and to them to listen and to accept it. You don't have to agree with it.
And I think you had mentioned as well is that it could be something too. Something may be driving it that has nothing to do with actually a failure on your part. It may have been something that, that's where that listening and just letting them get it out. Something else that's upsetting them, and it could come out that that's all that it was, versus having a reaction right away of like trying to defend. And then otherwise, hopefully they're pointing something out that you're like, oh, I didn't realize that. We need to work on that, because clearly that's something that's just not working. Then the other part is, if you have someone who gives you positive feedback, definitely want to encourage them, if they've given you that, whether it's maybe on your website or through a survey, encourage them to go rate you on a third-party site, maybe one that you're focusing on, whether it's a Google, My Business thing, or the Yelp or something like that. Encourage them to go fill that out, because now that's again taking advantage of that energy and using it to help you promote the school and collecting those really good reviews. If it's a negative one, really important to engage with them and try to make it right, try to fix it. Don't just be like, oh, well, that stinks. Really try to say, well, what can we do to fix that? Because it's like, obviously we want you to have a good experience here. Because remember, think of that American Express study we mentioned earlier. Those people that have positive experiences go tell 11, I think it was 11 other people on average, but the ones that have negative ones will tell 15 on average, right? So that's something you want to try to take care of, because that's going to hurt. Having that spread around. And I know for me, Stephen and I were just talking about this yesterday. I had a negative experience with a shopping site or whatever, and man, I tell all kinds of people about it because they really made me mad. And so I'm more than happy to complain about them.
Chris, you raised something good there when you said, find out from them what it is that's going to make it right. If you put a small amount of the onus on the customer to tell you what they want, you have a better chance of solving their problem the first time. You don't have to guess. If they know what they want, encourage them to tell you. But you may also find that a lot of the time they don't know what will make it right. So have a couple things in your back pocket to offer.
Yes. Here at AOPA, we like to offer hats. I'm teasing. A hat for every occasion. Okay. So the last part we wanted to do is we wanted to get into some ideas of what you do with it. Now that you've taken the effort to, Stephen, thank you for featuring the hats. So we wanted to talk about what do you do with it? What are some of the things you can take this feedback and actually how do you use it to help improve your business or to make it valuable to you? And of course, some of the stuff that I was researching here had to do with, you can imagine some larger companies doing some of this gathering of information versus a smaller one, but the same methods basically apply just as a smaller one. Hopefully it's a little bit easier. So the first part is you want to make sure, and this goes not just that same stuff we talked about by acknowledging them, but acknowledge that you received that feedback. So that could just be, and it shouldn't just be the automatic reply, like, thank you for giving us your feedback. Let them know, like, hey, we got your comment, and follow up with, here's our plan. And in doing that, telling them what steps you're going to take to try to work on that, make sure you give them a timeline within the next 7 days or within by Wednesday or whatever. Just give them a time and then follow up on that. Follow up on your plan. So let them know, I've heard you. This is what we're working on, and this is when we're going to solve this or do this for you or whatever it may be. You also want to categorize the types of comments that you're getting. And there are a couple of different ways. I'm just trying to remember here. The way you want to categorize these it could be by the type of like what the department is. So maybe it's a maintenance issue that you're hearing about. So the reason you want to categorize these because it helps you identify trends in a particular place, and it also helps you distribute that information to the appropriate people. So we'll take 3 categories for a flight school. Let's say like it's maintenance, it could be the front desk staff scheduling, let's say, and then your instruction. So let's just save those for now. There may be other things as well. So by identifying out like, hey, we're seeing a lot of comments coming in about maintenance. Now there's something to go look at and say, well, what's going on? Are people not understanding something? Is there an issue happening with the airplanes? It helps you go identify that and follow it up. Plus you can then take those and give those to the maintenance folks so they can be aware of it too. And you can start to strategize, what can we do about this? And the same with instruction, same way you can address that with your flight instructors at the next monthly or weekly meeting, whatever you may do. And remember that they do come in 2 different types. You have your unqualified, I'll call it, which these could just be people that have not really engaged with you. They haven't read anything. And what I mean by that is that they literally just come on and they're just grumpy and they're going to complain to somebody about something. And they really have not engaged with your product at all. And it's kind of unfair. So again, you still listen, give them their time, but you're not as concerned about those because clearly this person may not be fully engaged in it. But versus your loyal customer, but who has had a disappointing experience. That's a completely different thing. That second type is key. You really need to engage with them. You do not want to lose that customer. You want to find out what happened. You've had a good experience so far. Where was our failure? What can we do to fix it? Those are the ones you really want to take seriously versus some that may just be someone that it really doesn't understand and is not a true customer in the sense, if you follow what I mean. I hope that's clear. Anyway. Elizabeth, I know that analyzing the business objectively, can you give us some ideas there?
Absolutely. So you can get a lot of data out of your business that is going to give you clues as to what's going on. So make sure that you're using that. Are people referring to your school? Are your customers referring others to your school? Are your students coming back? Do you have a big dropout rate at a certain point of time? For example, let's say people come and they do that first discovery flight and one more, and then they stop coming back. Why? But you can identify some problems like that. You can also see how your individual CFIs are doing with students. Are they getting them through the process? Are they running into problems? Are there particular complaints? There's a lot of data that you have in your business. And just for a shameless plug, those of you who are familiar with the AOPA Flight Training Advantage, where a lot of this information is being entered as part of your students' training process, you can pull that data out and turn it into reports that are useful to you. But that objective business data can help validate or negate what you're hearing in other sources. So if you're seeing that, one of your CFI's students all seem to be dropping out and you get a complaint, that's valid. Even though you maybe only got one complaint, you can see the data to back it up. So that's really important to use that where you have it.
And again, that whole objective part as well, it helps you to get that third picture we talked about earlier on too, is like to be ready to accept whatever it is, not what you think is going on, because
Right.
oftentimes it's not the same thing.
That's
We
right.
tend to be too close. The key part here is, and I know Elizabeth, you found this one point, that actively following up, and I know you mentioned it earlier, but did you want to talk in any more detail about the service recovery idea?
Yeah, sure. So we mentioned this earlier that service recovery is actually better for long-term customer loyalty than delivering perfect service every time in the first place because it shows that you actually care. When you try to make something right, you're investing your time, energy, and possibly money in that customer. And that's what people want. They want to be heard and they want to know that they're important to you. So even if you make a mistake, take it on to recover. Don't wait. The moment is now. And if you can't do what they want you to do right away, do as Chris mentioned earlier as we started off on this slide, give them a time frame. This will be resolved by the end of the week. We will credit your account within 24 hours. Whatever that looks like, give them a timeline, respond quickly. And this last point about collecting data at every opportunity and alerting stakeholders to do that, there are lots of little ways in addition to the sort of the bigger things we've talked about that can give you a chance to interact with your customers. Whenever you're sending out an email to them, give them a link to provide feedback, invite them to provide feedback in the course of regularly doing business. That's also going to give you a more honest reflection of what's happening in your business as opposed to just when you have a crisis. Chris?
Exactly. And the other part there too is it's like this idea of alert your stakeholders too. In some cases, you might have something where you could potentially set something up where that if you get, let's say you're doing an NPS, a net promoter score, and you get something less than an 8, maybe that's what you've chosen as your floor, that you could have an alert that comes up and says, hey, we just got one that's a review that's a 6. And so that way you can immediately go find that and find about it. Or if you don't have the tech that might do that or whatever, the software, just having somebody regularly go in and look at that every day. So it's important to be on top of that. And there was an example I read in one of these articles too that talked about, imagine if you were online and you're working on something and you're whatever, something's not working. So you send a little thing off in the chat or to the company saying, hey, this isn't working. And obviously you're getting frustrated if you're going to send it to them, like, this isn't working. There's a total difference between someone where it's like they pop right back with an email or a message saying, yep, don't worry, we just fixed that for you, go ahead, within minutes of it happening, versus either never responding to them and now they just go and tell other people about how this website's horrible, or taking days and days later, and you're kind of like, at that point you've already, it's already been festering and all that sort of stuff. So being on top of things and getting back to them quickly can be a big key in either keeping a customer and then being impressed with, wow, your customer service is amazing, versus I'm out of here because this is just an awful experience. I know that I've had this experience with a simulator here that we have access to at AOPA. They are amazingly fast at the service. We put a squawk in, within an hour we get something back and they're working on it. And so to me, that really impresses me. So it takes away that frustration of like, oh my gosh, this thing's not working correctly right now, knowing that they're on it and they're going to fix it. And it's like, I'm not going to have to wait for a very long time for that to happen. So key.
I'd also like to mention, I'm sure that for some of you who are regularly part of this connector, it feels like every time we meet, you end up with a to-do list, right? And you're already very busy running your businesses. So in fairness, I do want to say that the mode through which you get the feedback matters. So people's expectations are very different from a conversation that they have with you face to face, as opposed to a conversation that they have by email or something that they post on their website. So keep in mind that the timing, how much time you have to respond, does depend a little bit on the medium in which you receive the feedback, as well as the nature of the issue. So if it's a complaint and it's serious and it goes right to the heart of your business, get on it right this second. If someone sends you an email, you've probably got 24 hours to respond. If you're standing face to face, you better be able to come up with a solution right now. Right. So there are some differences there. And I would also say, when you think about your overall business strategy, try to make time for these things as part of other daily activities that you do so that it doesn't become onerous. So for example, if you are daily posting to social media, then that's a great time to check on any kind of feedback that you're getting in that same moment. So it doesn't have to be hours and hours of your day. You can fit it in along with the other things that you're already doing.
And I think probably the key thing, I'm going to go ahead and go to the next slide because it follows up with your point, is the key part there is just making it something that you can use. So it's like I said, when I was doing this research too, there are a ton of places that will offer you software and all these various things, ways to do that. You just got to find which ones may work for you and just pick a few and focus on those. Because that way, otherwise it could be overwhelming.
Don't ask for feedback you don't have time to respond to, right? So don't send out a survey at your busiest time of year if you're not going to be able to have the time to actually do something with that data.
Fair enough. One thing that just came to my mind, I want to say it well before I forget. There was a school that I remember I went up and visited. It was a number of years back. And one of the things that really impressed me is they had a school that was actually about to run out of business. And so it was the son of the owner decided, it's like, hey, you know what, Dad, let me go in and just try this, because it was like they already had it was a full FBO. They had a maintenance shop and a charter thing that was going really well. The school was just struggling. He said, give me 6 months to just see what I can do with this. And one of the things that had happened is under the previous management of the school, they just did not pay attention and they did not ask their customers for feedback. And he said mainly because they didn't want to hear the answers because they were afraid of it. He said what he started doing was he started saying, not only like were they soliciting feedback, but they said the key question he started using was, what can we do better for you? Because even if like everything's great, it's like nobody's the 100%. It's like, what if I'm at 92%, how do I get to 93 for you? So what can we do better? And I thought that was a really enlightening question. I thought it was a powerful way to think about that too. So just something to think about. All right, so one of the things you want to do too is to use this data to help you refocus your business strategy. And Elizabeth, I know that if you want to talk about the idea of educating the staff and focusing on these opportunities, what do you think there?
Yeah, sure. So, when you discover that certain things get a positive response and other things get a negative response, obviously you want your staff, your team to focus on doing the things that are going to engender a positive response. Give them clear parameters about how to do that. So we answer the phone within 3 rings. Whatever that may be, right? Because that's going to influence a positive reaction. And do keep in mind that this is not something you can do once on a Monday morning, get everybody together and say, all right, I want you to answer the phone after, no more than 3 rings. That'll work for about an hour. And your team is just like all of the rest of us. They're busy. They've got lots of different things on their mind. And unless it becomes a habit, they won't consistently do it. So you're going to have to not only educate them on those preferred behaviors, but you're going to have to re-educate them. Make it part of your team meetings to have reminders. Obviously, model the behavior you want yourself and be explicit about what it is that you want them to do. People will generally do it. They just need to know what it is.
And the big thing there is, I think, you're getting at is it's really about building a culture. You're trying to build a culture of customer service within that, using this feedback. And if you go to places like, I know that Elizabeth and I are both big fans of going to Disney. They're really good at that if you've ever been there, or places like, I'm trying to think of other places like Chick-fil-A or some of the other places that are just well known for just excellent customer service. In that sense, they have taken the time and invested in building a culture of this is how we do things here. So.
And, focusing on opportunity you have in there too, Chris. And there are a million opportunities, not only the big ones that your customers bring to you of, I need you to do this better, but there are a million opportunities in your daily interactions with your customers to do it a little bit better. And if you kind of make that sense of continuous improvement part of your culture too, and seize those moments, then you're going to have very satisfied customers.
And one thing that I thought was interesting, and I think this could fit into a flat school, which is why I added it, but this idea of there's like company-wide customer huddles. This is really, I think, fit well, just in my experience in working in a flat school, it'll fit well in like our CFI meetings. Sharing some of the feedback that you get, maybe when we talked about categorizing it out, so you get that flight instruction side of it, let's say, and then sharing that at your regular meetings with your CFIs to say, hey, here are some of the things we're hearing. And that could be giving kudos for like, hey, this person did a really good job, so let's keep that up, nice job. And then, hey, we saw some issues here, let's work on this and give some suggestions on this is what we'd like to do there. And that could work in any of your departments too, whether it's talking to maintenance or whatever. I'm sure that most people take the time just to do at least a short meeting, just kind of saying like, here's where we are, how things going, and using that as part of it. But there was one that I didn't list actually, never mind, I did. Leveraging positive feedback. How do you leverage the positive feedback? I was thinking ahead of my notes here and jumping, but the interesting stat here was that 82% of customers trust other customers more than they do anything else. And I forget the study. Oh, SurveyMonkey did that study, and they found that rather than marketing or other things, and think about it, look, if you go to like Amazon or someplace like that, you go look at this product and you're looking at the reviews. It's like, and if there's 4,000 reviews and they gave it 5 stars, it's like, oh, this must be a decent product versus two, like for the 3 stars and only 4 reviews. You're going to trust what other people say about that. So that makes a difference. So use that feedback. If you get good customer feedback, utilize that in your marketing. And really spread that, turn this stuff out because people trust that. And that's where using those third-party websites, and I know, Elizabeth, you mentioned monitoring here, but using those third-party websites can become very powerful. Did you want to just mention that idea of monitoring? Or
yeah, just don't forget to do it, right? Because it's easy in your day to not go out and look at Yelp or look at Google. It's really worth doing though, because you need to respond quickly, as we talked about in other areas. You need to respond quickly if you see a trend emerging on one of these third-party sites for the negative. And for the positive, you want to capture that. You might even want to respond to those customers who are giving you positive reviews and reach out to them and invite them to give you a testimonial or to participate in some other way so that you can feature them.
Exactly. And the other thing is that you can use that, of course, on your website as well. Stick it on your website. We've got 5 stars on Yelp or whatever it might be. Stick that on your website and use it to your advantage. And then the last bit here was featuring happy customers in campaigns or programs. And what we meant by this was talking about the idea of maybe like it's something along the lines of a customer loyalty program or giving them some benefit. You've got customers that are giving you positive feedback. Maybe you reward them with it. Here's whether it's a hat or here's some extra sim time or whatever it may be. Something where it gets them to go out and refer you, get them excited so they go refer you to other customers and spread the good news in a sense about your school and what it is you're doing. Okay. We have talked a whole lot about the different ways of getting customer feedback, and we mentioned how you could potentially use it. I know Steven's got a handout, and you're going to put that into the chat or something, Steven. We can share that. We've got a link maybe. These are the articles that when I was looking some of the stuff up that I found that I thought were useful, and especially some of them had hyperlinks within them going to other places. So I thought these might be useful to you to go read in more detail about it, and this might be something you could find that you would like. So these were the 4 that I found interesting as we were doing this. So I just want to share that with you, and I know Steven's got the handout potentially coming there. He's looking at that. All right. So the last bit we wanted to do here before we wrap up for the day was to open it up for any discussions. And I see that Lori mentioned if there's a negative comment on Google or Yelp, would you reply online or let it be?
Oh, that really depends, Lori, on the circumstances. If you can make an appropriate response, something like, we're very sorry you had that experience. Please contact us or we'll reach out to you and we can fix it in this way. Fantastic. Go for it if you think you can diffuse it. If the truth is that, you can't do anything to help and it's just one comment, you might want to think carefully about whether you start a firestorm, because a lot of times what happens is you're intending to solve the problem, you get in there and it just opens up, whatever response you give just opens up the floodgates, and then this person brings their friends and you end up with a whole slew of negative comments, often from people who are unqualified, weren't part of the event, don't know what is really going on, maybe not even your customers. But you do risk opening the floodgates. So I would suggest that where possible, go ahead and respond. Be apologetic about their experience, even if you don't necessarily agree with them, and offer a solution. If you can't offer a solution or at least a clear explanation, watch it, and if it doesn't get worse, if there are no more people joining in, consider steering clear. Just let that feedback stand, and try to get some people who are more positive about your business to put in reviews, and that can push that negative review down. It'll also reduce the impact of that review on your overall score.
And I think the other thing to follow up on there too, as I had read as well, I think it was exactly along with the lines you're saying, is if you're able to resolve it with them, ask them if they'd be willing to go back and edit that, because I know that I've seen that plenty of times where you see somebody puts a negative comment and then customer service reaches out to them and then they come back and say, you know what, these guys were amazing. They came back, they fixed this, they had it done in this days, they sent me whatever it was. And it makes you go like, oh, well, so I saw that negative comment, but I clearly see it was resolved. They've got good service, so that I'm not as concerned about that one anymore. I know that they'll take care of me if I choose to be a customer there as well. So just before we go, I wanted to open up the opportunity. What are some ways that you, and you could, whether you want to raise your hand or turn your camera on and speak with us, or just maybe type it in the chat, but what are some ways that you plan to use, or maybe you already use, customer feedback to help your business out? And the main thing we want here is maybe there's some ideas you can share that would help other folks on the call or other flight schools that might watch this at a future date as well. So looking for ideas, how might you be able to use customer feedback to help your business?
Yeah, our very best sessions of Connector are the ones where you guys get involved and share thoughts. We really, a big point of doing this is to let you connect with one another. You guys are the ones out in the trenches doing this every day, and I am eternally impressed with your creativity and the things that you guys come up with, and it's fantastic when you can share them with one another. So if anybody's got any ideas or maybe some unusual experiences, or maybe even a question for the rest of the group, something that you would like your peers to offer some insight on.
Right, maybe you're dealing with something and you're looking for a way to handle that. It's a great way to go about that.
So, you know, while we're waiting for that, one of the things that you hear complaints about a lot, and it's also one of the easiest to solve, is things to do with billing rather, that you have a mistake, an accounting mistake. You know, that's pretty easy. Make sure that the people who deal with that are empowered to solve it. Looks like we've got a hand up.
Yeah, we got Jamie. Want to go ahead and turn your camera on, or go ahead, Jamie?
Hi.
Hey.
So, it's very dark and cold up here. Actually, it's not that cold. It's going to be in the 30s today. So
yay!
Yay! Really weird. I went up to Fairbanks this weekend and there's no snow on the ground, and it was at 48 degrees in Alaska in November.
Wow.
That was freaky. Anyway, so my big thing is, how do I strategically or nicely turn people away?
Are you asking, Jamie, because you don't have time, you're out of capacity, or are you asking because you don't want to teach these people?
I guess it's mostly because I don't want to teach these people. You know, they're people like, well, I've had 3 check ride failures from 3 different DPEs, and I have 142.6 hours. That's one of the, you know, like that. And there's no way that I can't, I know I can't, I don't have the patience to fix that.
Right.
Or, you know, that's one of them. And another is just, yeah, I just don't, I'm just full.
Yeah.
I just don't, yeah. And the problem is that I really don't want to, they always ask me for recommendations.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, of course, they're going to ask me for recommendations. And I'm like, well, you know, I don't give any recommendations to any other flight schools. I'm like, do you want the one that kills students and flight instructors and fatals, or do you want the one that just has had 3 wrecks in the last 4 months?
Okay, well, that sounds like you don't have a lot of great options,
right,
Jamie. So let's deal with just that part first. If people are looking for recommendations, sometimes it's helpful to say, I don't have personal experience, but here's where you can find the other schools on the field. That way you're taking the responsibility. You're not telling them that this is a great experience, but you are telling them how they can find somebody else to help them. Or, you know, there are only 2 flight schools here, but there are also some over at this airport. You might want to check them out. So that at least gives them a direction to go. When it comes to turning people away politely, be honest, but be tactful. So I'm so sorry, my schedule is really full at the moment, and based on your experience, you deserve individualized attention. I can't give you right now.
Right.
Things like that, right? So what's the positive thing that you can say to the customer? Something that is good for them, like you deserve individualized attention. You've had a tough time. I can see from your experiences that this has been a challenge for you and you've had some challenging circumstances. So you're validating them, and at the same time, you're being honest. I can't deliver this for you right now.
Right, right. Yeah, there's been some challenging situations that have come up about people think that I can just wave my magic wand, and I'm like, not always.
Right? And that's the hardest, because we never want to, at least in the broadest sense, we never want to discourage someone from flying. We never want to, and you never want to tell someone that they're a failure. They can't do it. You don't want them to leave a conversation feeling that way. And there are a lot of other things going on in a situation like that. But I think being honest and being tactful with the focus on them, not on what you can't do for them, but on how to get what they need,
Right.
is going to be your best approach. I'm sure some other people have some thoughts on this.
Right.
Right.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. I definitely want to give the opportunity for anybody. So please feel free to raise your hand if you've got especially something, maybe either your own thing, or if you wanted to give Jamie an idea. I'm sure she would appreciate it. I know one thing that I had heard some schools doing with situations like that, they have somebody that maybe is training and they haven't sold yet. It's 60 hours, 70 hours, whatever it may be. And so they have that hard conversation saying, maybe this is just not going to happen. Like you're just having a hard time getting this. And in some cases, the person may decide that they're not going to continue. But more often than not, I've heard that they just like flying. They just enjoyed it and they just keep doing it. So basically, effectively, they just keep going up for flight training with no expectation of that I'm going to get my check ride done in the near future. And just I want to keep learning because I enjoy doing it. And so that might be a situation too if you've got the time or you have the instructor. And I know, Jamie, you're a little different because I think, as I recall, you're just kind of doing all the instruction yourself at the school. So it might be a different case with capacity.
I love Brett's idea of collecting feedback during a luncheon or party. You can actually invite people for that very purpose. It's a way to make your customers feel valued because you're soliciting their opinion. It's also a great way, to have an almost informal focus group. When they start hearing from each other, they'll feed off each other and you'll get more insight than you would have otherwise. So if you can make it fun and invite, tell your customers, I'm inviting a small group to come and do this. It'll make them feel special. It'll make them feel important.
So we got a great question here from Rachel. She says, is there a good way to solicit feedback specifically for different components of the school instead of the school as a whole? In other words, can I just focus on getting feedback about my flight instructors or my DPE services, et cetera, all the different departments?
I would say you bet. Ask people who are using those services who have just had an experience with that service, if you're aware of it. So let's say somebody showed up to take a flight and the plane was down for maintenance and they scheduled with a different aircraft, or they scheduled at a later time. That's a good moment to ask them how they feel about the airplanes and about the way they're maintained. You can also do very short surveys that you're rotating. So instead of trying to do an overall survey, just ask one question instead of, how do you feel about the school? You can ask a net promoter question about the flight instructor. How do you feel about this flight instructor? Or you can ask a question about any other part of your business. And if you rotate those periodically, you will get ongoing responses and you'll be able to cover all aspects of your school over time. Just be careful when you do that you're dealing with qualified customers. So a customer who is in for a flight review is not going to give you a good answer about DPE services. They're going to hear what if they say anything, it'll be what they've been told, what they've heard. Oh, my friend waited a month for a check ride. It was terrible. So that's not your most qualified customer. So just be cautious who you ask when you're breaking it down like that.
Maybe an idea there too could be just that something you could create, almost like we do marketing journeys, where you can make a journey in their training progress and say hey, you just soloed, here's a particular survey that I'd like you to do, or you just passed your check ride, or things like that. So the check ride could be one for the DPE, and maybe doing the solo or solo cross country could be one for how things going with your instruction. And I'm just thinking, I know that in the structure that we do in the survey and building it, you could even have little drop downs as well. So you could have it for the particular department. Let's say you wanted a simple net promoter score, is what you were looking for, maybe with an open-ended response part, and you could just have it where they can check the department they want to review and then give you the net promoter score based on whatever specific thing they'd like to evaluate. So there's definitely ways of structuring that to make it work.
And a quick feedback for someone who's used, like, let's say somebody's come to you and used your testing service to take one of their written exams. You know that, and when they have completed their exam, you fire off an email, preferably automated, that says, thank you for coming to us for your exam, and then ask them 2 or 3 questions about the experience.
Exactly. Well, hey, I know we've come to the end of the time. Awesome. Coming to the end of the time. And so I want to make sure we are respectful of your time. We appreciate you being here. I know that this is being recorded, and so that will be put up on, Steve, you want to help us out? It's on the AOPA Live channel, I believe. That's where it gets posted.
Yes, yeah, it gets posted to AOPA Live. We have a playlist specifically set aside for Flight School Connector.
Awesome. And so check that out. If you have any ideas that you would like to suggest to us for topics that you're interested in, and one of the ones that we're playing around with right now is about how, like, practically, how do you deal with an irate customer, or how do you deal with customer or service recovery? So we're looking at researching into that one for you as a future session, sort of based on what we discovered as we were working on this one. But let us know. Give us an email at ftinitiative@aopa.org. or throw it in the chat here if you've got an idea. We would love to hear from you, because we will definitely work on that. So, all right, other than that, barring anything else, I want to thank you all for being here, and we will look forward to seeing you next month for the next edition of Flight School Connector here from AOPA headquarters.
Thanks, everybody.
All right, have a good one, everybody.